in Midtown. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Doctor's Rescue's lecture on how to mend a broken heart, reunite the mind and heart. Let's get started, Doctor's Rescue.
Thank you, Ms. Kiban. Thank you, everybody, for being here and taking a good part of their precious Saturday day off to be here and drive. So I will, today I'm not going to be a cardiologist. I'm going to try to be a neurologist or psychiatrist. So this is way out of my comfort zone. So, but I hope that at the end I'm going to be able to send a message that I have learned the hard way in our heart failure clinic, that unless I can help you with your brain and with your worries and with your stress, I cannot mend a broken heart. So this is my attempt to try to understand that. So here is a sobering article that was published actually 2 months ago in New England Journal. Thought leaders in the field did a study, and the paper was entitled "The Failing U.S. Health System." We, as a nation, spend 20% of our national product on healthcare at this time. And you can see here, if we plot here, we look at the spending, we have the highest spending. But compared to 9 other countries, and these 10 will be the most developed nations in the world at this point, we seem to have a way worse performance in terms of results for our patients and where this money go. For example, the United States has the lowest life expectancy among the 10 countries that we study, 4 years less. So we live 4 years less than the average 9 other countries. We rank the last on measures of preventable mortality. I'm talking about the chronic diseases, diabetes, high blood pressure, strokes, heart attacks, or kidney disease. We have the highest, during the COVID, the last 4 years, we had the highest excess mortality related to COVID in people who are younger than 75. And we have the highest rate of death from self-harm, death by suicide, which has been dramatically increasing in the last 20 years, or death by violence. And a lot of this is actually mixed up with, despite of spending the most money in the whole world as a country, we actually have the least access to care compared to other developed nations. There's inequality and the least access to healthcare, access barriers being inadequate coverage, even in those who are insured because of the high skyrocketing deductibles and co-payments. So if I were to look at both sides of the coin, let's look at the receiver end as a patient, talking about the financial stress. Turns out that currently medical expenses are the leading cause of bankruptcy in the United States, personal bankruptcy, accounting for 2/3 of the cases. 15% of those being actually related to a child illness. A third of the adults with healthcare debt declare bankruptcy or lost their home, or plan or declare bankruptcy later in the year because of it. And almost half bankruptcy are related to the fact that if you're sick, you quit your job, so you lose your insurance. And who applies for bankruptcy? Or actually the middle class citizen with healthy care insurance, not the ones. And that's at the receiver end. And then we have at the other end, our country spends more than 20% of all our national product a year on healthcare, and this is skyrocketing. So the whole nation is in stress too. But then, what about the doctors? They're doing great, right? And here's the deal. Medical doctors, dentists, police officers, financial services, lawyers, farmers and pharmacists are the top 10 jobs in this country that have the highest suicidal rate. And doctors have been the number one for a long time. And that's in the United States. It looks like the job that requires significant level of aptitude, sacrifice, and education seems to be more likely to increase the risk of suicide. So I do not know about the other job, but I can tell you, practicing medicine in the last 25 years, that I found that the burden of stress comes from the fact that actually our job is a financial transaction at the end of the day. It creates a toxic job culture. There's a high risk from a burnout from a long training. We have probably one of the jobs, probably is the job with the longest training. After you even finish medical school, you can't practice. You got to practice. You got to train for at least another 5-8 years. That's for doctors, nurses, similar. There's under high pressure, sleep deprivation, financial pressure too. I know you wouldn't think doctors have financial pressure. They do, because on average alone, just from medical school, I poll every year my colleagues, the fellows who graduate, and ask them, well, how much in average do you owe? And it's between 250 and 300,000 per person. That's just medical school. Forget about college or anything else. And then imagine that 50% of them marry another doctor. They start their life at age 30 with $600,000 loan. Okay, so yes, it's actually financial pressure too, even for doctors. Then we're also workaholics. So this high emotional, financial, social status reward, it could be one of the explanations. But if we look in other countries, developed countries like Great Britain, actually it's not the doctors, which is they work under a government system that does not reward doctors based on how many patients they see necessary. It's actually poverty and lack of control or insecurity. So it's the lower class that's affected there with a high suicidal rate. Trying to make a point, and I'm going to introduce you Gabor Mate. There are actually a couple of, really most of what I'm about to say over the next few hours is our thoughts and science from two scientists or doctors. One of them is Dr. Gabor Mate. I'm going to introduce two of his books. But he said that we live in a toxic culture. And much of what passes for normal in our society is neither healthy nor natural. To meet the modern society criteria for normality is in many ways to conform to requirements that are profoundly abnormal in regard to our nature-given needs, which is unhealthy and harmful on the physiological, mental, and even spiritual level. Emphasis here is not just mental, it's not just spiritual, it's physiological. That means it affects us with physical symptoms and disease. And there's in the two books that I'm going to present, one is the When the Body Says No, the other one is The Myth of Normal. He actually explores the relationship between the mind and the body and the role of stress, trauma, and societal pressures in health. Basically, he ends up in an optimistic way, showing that we can become empowered by recognizing their chronic diseases as bodily expression of mental suppressions, and by rediscovering our authentic self, we have a chance to actually repair ourselves. So he basically, if we look into our American Association, Heart Failure Association guidelines, it says, well, disease can be overcome and fixed by working on a healthy lifestyle, right? And that includes eating whole foods, exercise, sleep, device disconnect, avoid poisons, ultra-processed food, alcohol, smoking, and try to manage the stress. So which one do you think is the single most important from all these? The stress, see? But if you are the doctors, that's not what they're going to say. No, it's stress. I'm about to explain. So, so Dr. Gabor Mate in The Myth of Normal quotes Tony Blair, who was a prime minister in Great Britain a while ago, who gave this speech where he said, many health problems are not, strictly speaking, public health problems at all. They are questions of lifestyle: obesity, smoking, alcohol abuse, diabetes. These are not epidemics in the epidemiology sense. They are the results of individual decisions at millions points in time. So notice the shift of emphasis from public government responsibility and policy to individual. Is this true? And the answer is absolutely not. It's the other way around. You know, if I'm poor, if I don't have access to anything, if I'm alone, how am I going to be able to eat healthy or do anything about myself? So this ignores that chronic stress is actually determines the lifestyle. Because it's actually, we have evidence now, science, that because it's inflammation, premature aging, we can actually measure that by looking at what is called at the end of our chromosomes, each time the cells divide, they're called telomeres that we can measure, and the shorter these telomeres get, actually the shorter is our biological age. And this has been shown in black people who are exposed to racism. They have shorter telomeres. This has been shown in doctors, medical residents who are in training. You know, sleep deprivation, by the time they finish their 3 years of training, it's equivalent they lost 10 years of life. Doesn't mean it will stay like that, but we have evidence for that. How and what we eat, sleep, or how we parent, you know, it's passed on from parents to children. We call this generational trauma that runs in family. You'll be surprised. The way we parent is the way I saw my parents parenting me, who is the way they saw their parents parenting us. And it disregards the fact that, for example, certain populations who are discriminated against, Black, Asian, minority ethnic, poverty, are major risk factors for obesity, type 2 diabetes, acquiring and dying from COVID, and overall cardiovascular mortality. So, to quote Dr. Gabor Mate, is not what you're eating, but what's eating you that makes the difference. All right? And we have learned this by a study done by Dr. Vincent Felitti at Kaiser Permanente. There is a very strong correlation between childhood abuse and household dysfunction as a cause of leading cause of death in adults 20, 30 years later. And I'm going to present you in detail that study later on. But what you need to know is that Dr. Vincent Felitti, he actually had an obesity clinic. So he started to work on trying to help people lose weight. And he was able to do that. There were people lose 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds. But he was unable to let them keep the weight down. So when he started to talk to them, he realized that the ones who were under major stress were not able to keep it down. And the ones who were not were able to continue. So this started basically as obesity is not necessarily an issue, and losing weight is not necessarily an issue of lifestyle choices. It's actually the issue of being exposed in the past as a child and also in the present to chronic stress. So if we are, American Heart Association separates what we call the advanced childhood, the stress as internal versus external. Basically we have advanced childhood experiences, and then we have community-related, negative experiences. Of course, that would be under policy and government control, but I'm going to focus on the ones that directly affect us. And I'm going to pose that our personal life experiences create personality traits. So it doesn't mean that's who we are, but we require certain traits which then lead to chronic physical disease. And actually by working on the personality traits and repairing them and achieving mental, and we can achieve physical health and reverse the chronic disease. So the best way, I'm going to present this as a story of 8 patients who I think I interviewed them for this at length, and they agree. Of course, there are no identifiers about this, but I thought their stories are relevant to show you the personality patterns that can actually predispose us to chronic illnesses and what we can do about it. And so the first one, I give them labels not to label them. I just wanted to create a pattern that's easy for us to remember it. So this is by all means does not identify that particular person with the label I gave. So I call this one the abused and caregiver. And that's a personality trait pattern that can lead us to disease. So this is a 47 years old black woman with severe obesity, type 2 diabetes. Now, after knowing her for about 20 years, about 2 years ago, she pretty much was at almost the end stage. The ejection fraction is down to 10%, normally 60%. The kidneys have failed. They're working also less than 20%. And over the past 20 years, also struggling with severe obesity. This is a 270 pounds for a 5'3", which is a little shorter than me. So that's a lot. In December 22, her weight was 267 pounds. We tried many ways how to help her lose weight. Of course, the more advanced you are, the more diabetes you have, the more intolerant you are to medicines that otherwise can help other people now, like Ozempic. She was on insulin 100 units a day since age 17, was declared type 1 diabetic. She was last year, in 22, she was every 2 weeks in the hospital, about over 20 admissions. Her hemoglobin 1C was 12, that means extremely poorly controlled diabetes. Those who are familiar know the normal will be less than 6.4. And then when I talked to her for a long time, I mentioned to her, hey, please listen to me. Let's try to change what you're eating and what you're doing. Nothing worked. As a matter of fact, often she would be, before she'll come to the clinic, she'll ask our assistant in front, how is rescue? Is he in bad mood or is he in good mood? And if she heard that I was in bad mood, she would actually avoid it or reschedule the visit. So clear, whatever I was doing was not working. And then I asked her, what happened? And he says, well, I just gave up to put any effort. So then eventually we explained to her at that stage that, there is nothing else they can offer because unfortunately she was too overweight for either LVAD or the heart transplant. The kidneys were too sick too. So the only option we had, I said, look, I called her on a Saturday. Look, why don't you let's try to work my way. Let me help you out. And so she said, well, what do I have to lose? Let me see. So then 8 months later, her weight was 202 pounds. She lost 65 pounds. Her BMI has improved. Her hemoglobin 1C got to the point that she was pre-diabetic. Actually, 5.6 is the upper limit of normal, almost non-diabetic. Okay. I helped her, and within 3 days, using continuous glucose monitor, by just eating healthy, she was off insulin, which was on for about 20 years. All right. Insulin is really promotes actual obesity, so that helped too. And then in July this year, her weight is down to 194 pounds. The total, I think she lost close to at least 70 pounds. Her hemoglobin is 5.4. That means her diabetes and pre-diabetes have been cured at that time. She's able now to walk 10,000 steps every day. Before she couldn't walk 20. Her heart function has improved. Her kidney function has improved. Now it's working about 50% from less than 20 before. And she tolerates, before, when you get so advanced heart failure, the medicines that may help you to improve your heart function actually become intolerant because they all drop your blood pressure too. We kind of know that. So now she tolerates actually the heart failure medicines, and she hasn't been admitted in the hospital for congestive heart failure. She's had some other little events, but nothing, no heart failure related admissions. And she feels better than she felt in 20 years. That is of July. Okay? So I'm going to show you the standard of care version of what we do as physicians, or we're trained, and I'm going to show also something else when we get stuck that we could consider. So the standard of care in managing patients with congestive heart failure with the reduced ejection fraction is basically works on the idea that heart failure progression is related to the chronic release of stress and growth hormones such as adrenaline, cortisol, stress hormones, insulin, and a couple of other ones are angiotensin, aldosterone. You don't need to remember all these words. What you do need to know is that once the heart is weak, even if there is no other insult, it will actually trigger in the brain and the rest of the body will start working under pressure and will trigger a stress response. The stress response will lead to release from the brain and of adrenaline, cortisol. These are the stress hormones. Problem with adrenaline, a weak heart, adrenaline kills your heart and kills your heart cells, and that further aggravates your ejection fraction. But also the brain releases other stress hormones and also growth hormones. Says, well, heart is weak, I need to grow it again. So what did we use to grow in the fetal life heart with? Those are hormones that are called angiotensin and aldosterone. Well, those are released by the kidneys. So then the kidney is part of the stress response. And what angiotensin does is basically it's enlarging the heart. The problem is when the heart is enlarged, it's under higher pressure and gets weaker. So by itself, according to the physical, Laplace law, that's what happened. Angiotensin raises the blood pressure, which is good for the brain, causes salt and water retention at the kidney level, but also causes insulin resistance and inflammation. 80% of our patients with heart failure, even if they never got diabetes, they get some form of insulin resistance, at least pre-diabetes. And the other way around, if you have diabetes, 80% will get heart failure. They're very linked together because the same hormones interact with the other hormones. Why? Because angiotensin is designed to grow. So insulin also is for growth, right? We store. So, however, you cannot grow if you use the glucose. So angiotensin hijacks the insulin property of growth, but blocking the glucose using of the growth, and that's why it causes insulin resistance. And then last but not least, aldosterone, it's another hormone that released by angiotensin from the adrenal glands, which are conveniently located by Mother Nature right above the kidney. So as soon as angiotensin is released from the kidney, it goes to the adrenal gland and then releases not only cortisol, the stress hormone, but also aldosterone. What aldosterone does, it says, well, we don't have just heart cells, muscle cells in the heart. We also have fibroblasts, the ones that make the scar. Well, we can grow that way. So that stimulates the scar formation in the heart. What's the problem with the scar? Once you have too much scar, it's irreversible. So it's a big deal. Also, aldosterone makes you retain salt and water. So this is how the cycle perpetuates. So what have we learned for over 30 years worth of research and clinical trials? That if we block all these 4 hormones and receptors in the heart, in the kidney, in the brain, then actually we can improve and prolong life in patients with congestive heart failure. However, there's one more catch. Independent of that, we also know that chronic emotional stress can cause also stress cardiomyopathy. So stress cardiomyopathy, it's a condition that surprisingly, it's found in 9 out of 10 patients being women. So it's 9-to-1 ratio. So why is it that women get under a lot of adrenaline and stress release? And we can always identify a recent major event. Divorce, a relative loss. And again, when we say recent, it doesn't have to be for a week or two. It could be for a year or 2 years. Or homelessness. And why is it that women against men are 9-to-1 ratio? Well, women are our stress buffer in the family. Now, it doesn't have to be genetic. It's a cultural belief maybe. But women take on the stress not only of handling a child, handling their own job, but also handling the man's stress in the family. So they are designed, unfortunately or fortunately, to be more resilient to stress, but at the same time are the ones who fall mostly victim to it. So stress is important. I was just making a point. Now, what is being recognized in our heart failure literature is the acute stress causes a certain form of stress cardiomyopathy. We call it Takotsubo. Okay? it's been ignored, the chronic stress can also aggravate and be part of that. And I'm pretty sure one day somebody's going to prove that. Until then, I will give you this, and I take responsibility for that. I'm pretty sure that the same, like it can happen acute, is also chronic, can cause heart failure, okay? Or at least the predominant cause of it. So what do? The proof of concept, I'm going to block the stress hormones. So we use beta blockers like carvedilol, bisoprolol, metoprolol to put a protective shield around the heart. Blocks the receptor for adrenaline, so the heart at least gets protected. We use medicines that block the angiotensin production or receptor for it on the cells of growth, like angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, that's like Sinopil, or blockers will be losartan, valsartan, you'll hear us candesartan, or Entresto, which is just the same like the others, but a little more potent, it's more recent and cost a little more. Or we use agents to block aldosterone, scar formation, spironolactone, eplerenone. And which one is the one that's left over? The insulin. Guess what? The biggest bangs that we've got in the last few years is actually using agents such as Jardiance or Farxiga, which are, we call them glucose transporter 2 inhibitors. What they make us release in urine excessive glucose. So when we do that, actually protects heart and kidneys by improving the insulin sensitivity. It reverses the insulin to doing its job not as a growth factor, but as a metabolic, allows the cells to be able to utilize the glucose for themselves and burn it. So these are the agents we know work. And that's why, and suddenly there are 4. You come to see me first time, you're shocked, I'm putting you on 4 drugs. Why am I going to insist to put you on that? Because we know if I can get you on those 4 medicines, improves your survival in 2 out of 3 patients by 5 years. In average, a patient will get to live at least another 7 years if we can get them there. So that's the standard of care. That is what our guidelines say. That's what we're trying our best to do. We have fantastic research and progress into that. I'm going to present a different story of the same patient. I gave you the medical story. Now I'm going to give you a stress story. And I'm going to try to address for the next few hours or so the question that I get almost every day from a lot of my patients. Doc, could stress have caused my heart condition? All right? And actually, the one who tried to answer this was Hans Selye, who actually coined the name stress in health and disease in the 1950s. He was a Canadian scientist who took rats and he started to give them pancreatic extracts every week, once a week for about 3-4 months. And then he measured what happened to their body. And I was hoping it can cause, his idea is that he noticed that there's a pattern. Almost everybody who gets sick, it doesn't matter what it is, they have some common features. Eventually they get depressed, they have similar headaches, palpitations, shortness of breath, general tiredness. And he was trying to figure out not what's different between different diseases, but what they have in common. And he was trying to work with this animal model. So he kept giving this, okay, I'm going to give a pancreatic extract, and he kept giving it, and the animals will get sick, all right, first. But then he kept trying to identify what's the substance from that pancreatic extract that actually makes them sick. And he kept diluting it and diluting that. At one point, just gave them simple, just water, what we call saline. And even that was still doing that. So then he realized that it had nothing to do with what he was giving to the animal to cause that. What it was is the fact that every week or twice a week, the animals were getting stressed from just getting injected, being grabbed, and do that. Okay? So that's why he's done the years. Now we have actually a whole pathway how this happened 50 years later. We know that any kind of stress we have, particularly acute, will trigger from our brain. Deep inside here, there's an organ, hypothalamus, that really regulates everything else that's happening with our body. Once you have stress, will trigger from hypothalamus and a release of hormones from pituitary gland, which then control all the other hormones, such as cortisol and adrenaline release from adrenal gland, And these stress hormones are able then to mobilize a response, an acute stress response, which, if it's short, it's actually positive. It helps us to survive a certain, if we have bleeding or have anything happen, that's what they are designed for. They are the flight or fight hormones now, they're called. And everything is fine as long as the stimulus is turned off. All right? But what happens if the system is turned off on for a long time? This is what we call chronic. And of course, the most frequent cause is emotional stress. Then we actually achieve the opposite. We get persistent hormone activation of this high-dose cortisol and adrenaline and others. I'm just using these two. It's the whole system there is released. Actually, it's deleterious to all organs. Actually causes dissociation between their functions, and they're no longer functioning as, to help the body. It causes inflammation. It activates it suppresses the immune system, increases our risk of getting autoimmune, confuses the immune system. So instead of the immune system, defending us from the outsider bacteria or viruses, allows them to come inside and starts working against us. So we start to get rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, like Crohn's disease, skin issue, eczema everywhere. And we don't make a connection when that happens. That has a lot to do with the fact that we have a confused immune system. But also, if the immune system doesn't do the job, we're predisposed to have increased risk of cancer. All right? Every day, each and our organ of the body, we have at least 1,000 cells. They are born to be malignant. But our immune system takes care of business as long as it's healthy. So that's why one relates to other. And also, it's part of chronic activation or chronic emotional stress now through the same hormones increases the risk of anxiety, depression, obesity, chronic illnesses, diabetes, heart attack, stroke, high blood pressure. We actually know that, for example, one rage episode that it's expressed or is not expressed, depending what kind of person you are, increases over the next 2 hours by 50% the risk of our heart attack. Our adrenal gland actually can become overactivated. Why? We need more cortisol. It actually gets bigger. We call it adrenal hyperplasia. Those are the people who are able to increase their adrenal gland size. Actually, they get problems with having too much cortisol, so they become what we call Cushing weights. The obesity with a certain distribution from moving from being a pear, more like an apple kind of person with central adiposity. That's actually stress related. But also it could be the other way around. Your adrenal gland can fail and you get adrenal insufficiency, depending what's your genetic predisposition. And the single most important part, the same chronic stress hormone activation makes us being the one who are sensitive to addictions. All right? There is a myth that heroin will addict everybody, that all the drugs and everything that we know is addictive will addict everybody. That is not true, actually. In general, 20% of us, or depends is the ones who've been traumatized and under chronic stress who become sensitized, so they become addicted, and I will explain why. All right? So that's important to know. The drug itself, not many, you can take them off, and they will be just fine. We'll go back to what happened. All right, so in our particular patient, going over her adverse childhood events after I talked to her, she explains how ever since she was little, 6, 7 years old, she was physical, verbal, sexual abused by cousins from age 8 to 11, and by parents. Then she continued to be verbally, physically, and emotionally abused by her mother until age 17, when she just left home. She couldn't put up with it anymore. And how was she? She had to be a caregiver for her younger brothers. And she was told that you gotta clean the house, you gotta cook, and make sure everything's fine. If that did not happen, she would get punished, both verbally and physically. At age 12, she found on her own that eating sweets and junk food, particularly pizza and French fries, and drinking sodas, really calmed her anxiety. Okay, She volunteered to tell me that. I did not ask her. All right? And eventually get insight into that. And at age 18, she gets pregnant. She has her first child. Meanwhile, she gains in a few years 80 pounds in 5 years. She develops diabetes at age 18, is placed on insulin, which again, that makes you gain more weight. Meanwhile, her mother gets sick. Guess what? Now, and I'm talking about nervous breakdown, psychiatry, serious illnesses to the point that she needs to have to really take charge of her because she didn't have her mom didn't have the capacity anymore to take care of herself. And she becomes caregiver for her mother. Then eventually, she marries a good man and has a second child at age 27. I'm talking about good man, supportive man, you know. But by then she develops congestive heart failure. I probably met her within a year or 2 years after that, or may have been very recently. But she continues to gain weight. And then suddenly, 6 years later, her husband, unfortunately, her main support, died of cancer after a couple of years. Then, with worse symptoms of heart failure, loses her job as healthcare nurse assistant. Again, not only that she was a caregiver early in childhood by demand, then taking care of her mother, but she chose a job that you're a healthcare provider. And unfortunately now she requires food stamps to live, so serious financial constraint. Now I'm going to stop here and I'm going to ask you to patiently watch a 9 minutes movie that I think it's a summary of the books and the best theory we have right now to put all this together about stress. They will do a much better job than I would do. That's why I would like for you to watch it.
Over half of us have a chronic disorder such as high blood pressure or autoimmune disease. Rates of anxiety, depression, PTSD, and addiction are skyrocketing. Why? The roots of these issues and more can often be traced to trauma, adverse childhood experiences, chronic stress, and ultimately, nervous system dysregulation. Meet your autonomic nervous system. Let's call it ANS. ANS takes care of a lot of your automatic functions, like your heartbeat, digestion, and body temperature. ANS also manages your survival and stress response, working to keep you alive when your life is in danger. ANS functions as our built-in detection system, constantly scanning our environment for cues of safety and cues of danger. As ANS scans the environment, it has 3 general responses or states. Safe. You feel calm, relaxed, and connected to those around you. Mobilized. When ANS detects danger, it sends a command and your heart rate and breathing increase, adrenaline and cortisol are released, and blood rushes to your muscles so you can handle the threat. This is our fight-flight response. Immobilized. When ANS detects that the danger is so great that you can't fight or run, it shuts you down. In this state, our heart rate, blood pressure, and body temperature decrease, and pain-numbing endorphins are released. ANS does all of this automatically without us thinking about it. ANS doesn't just use these states for survival, it uses them to navigate through the world each day. When ANS functions well, it moves fluidly from one state to another, 1 minute mobilized and ready for action, and the next resting and recovering. ANS will often blend states together. When we play, ANS combines the mobilized and safe states. And when we are intimate with loved ones, it combines immobilized and safe states. When ANS can stay flexible and fluid like this, it helps us manage and become resilient to stress and negative events. We're able to bounce back and move on. Unfortunately, when we experience trauma and chronic stress, it can keep ANS from functioning in a healthy, regulated, and resilient way, and can keep us stuck in states of survival. A friendly get-together can become frightening. A simple meeting at work can become threatening. For those with a history of trauma and chronic stress, the ANS detection system often becomes faulty, constantly signaling danger even when we are safe. It's like ANS is an alarm system, constantly signaling fire even when there's no smoke, and no flames. Consistently living in these survival states can be debilitating, and we often develop adaptive strategies like using drugs, alcohol, food, work, or sex in an attempt to bring regulation and temporary relief. Understanding how trauma impacts us is critically important. There is a whole spectrum of experiences that can be traumatizing and adversely impact ANS, like accidents, assaults, and natural disasters, which are often called shock traumas. There is also developmental or relational trauma, when we experience chronic adversity, abuse, neglect, and lack of safety while growing up. Many other experiences can be traumatizing, including chronic stress, medical procedures, and adverse community environments like poverty, discrimination, and violence. Additionally, new research in epigenetics shows us that trauma can get passed down genetically at least 3 generations. In the past, we've thought about trauma as events that happen to us. We now know that trauma is an experience, not an event. It's what happens inside of us as a result of what happens to us. It's our response to the event rather than the event itself. Over 20 years ago, Kaiser and the CDC launched a groundbreaking study of over 17,000 patients that showed a direct link between adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and long-term health and wellness. In the study, 2/3 of participants reported at least one ACE. Over 20% reported 3 or more. When participants reported 4 or more ACEs, this corresponded to an increased chance for heart disease, cancer, drug abuse, and more. With 6 or more ACEs, life expectancy decreases by almost 20 years. We are learning that many physical and emotional symptoms may emerge from a chronically dysregulated ANS. When ANS gets stuck in survival states, our biology shifts its focus from the tasks that keep us healthy, happy, and thriving to surviving the immediate perceived threat. Many conditions and symptoms that are chronic and difficult to diagnose and treat can be attributed to a dysfunctional ANS. Our childhood experiences can also keep us from connecting with others. This is vitally important because as children, our #1 survival priority is to attach to caregivers. When the people responsible for our safety aren't safe, and we are living in chronic states of unsafety, ANS doesn't get wired right. The part of ANS that judges what is safe and what is not becomes faulty. If intimacy and connection were unsafe as a child, as adults, we'll often unconsciously reject attempts from friends and partners to connect. Even though intimacy and connection is what we want, ANS feels it's unsafe and won't allow it. Trauma compromises our ability to engage with others, replacing the need for connection with the need for protection. When there has been trauma, ANS can no longer differentiate between our unsafe past and our now safe present. ANS can't turn off the need to protect, even though we are now safe. So what can we do when ANS becomes dysregulated? How do we recover from trauma and develop a healthy, regulated, resilient nervous system? Fortunately, we can retrain ANS to feel safe again. This is best done with the help of others. Each one of us has an ANS, and our ANS is constantly communicating with and attuning to the states of others. We autonomically mirror the states of those around us. This is called co-regulating. We see it in herd behavior. If one animal senses danger, the entire group becomes more alert, increasing their chances of survival. We're exactly the same. When we're with others who are stressed, angry, or depressed, it makes us feel worse. When we're with others who are calm and happy, it makes us feel better. Connecting with others who are safe, attuned, and present is the best way to restore a healthy ANS. For those struggling to recover from the impacts of trauma, there is an emerging field of innovative clinical therapies that have been developed to reestablish safety and regulation to ANS. We're also learning that many of the activities we intuitively know make us feel better, like spending time in nature, practicing yoga, dancing, helping others, and more, can help ANS become more regulated and resilient. Healing from trauma and finding release from being stuck living in survival states comes as ANS becomes regulated, increases its capacity for resilience, and regains its flexibility. It's not about being calm all the time or mobilized all the time. It's about having a flexible and resilient nervous system that can accurately assess safety and danger and responds appropriately. We're truly resilient when we can fluidly move from one state to another. For those living with the impacts of trauma and chronic stress, becoming unstuck is like beginning a new life. For the rest of us, understanding how our nervous system states guide our behavior can help us become happier, healthier, and more empathetic human beings. Collectively, we have an epidemic of social issues that are rooted in trauma. If we can do the work to heal past traumas and build healthy, regulated nervous systems as individuals, families, and communities, we can end the cycles that continue to reinforce our greatest challenges and create a safer, vibrant, and more connected world.
So I should probably just stop here, because whatever I'm about to say, I don't think can do better than this. But I think it's important to go through the process.
Over half of us.
Okay, it's going to be interesting. How do I move on to the next step? Okay, got it. So I'm going to try to debunk this and pause it a little bit. There are a couple of details that we need to be aware. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is to teach you what is this theory about, the polyvagal theory, and how does it apply to our daily life, and how can it help us. And we need to understand the anatomy structure that is behind this. And the anatomy structure is that this vagal nerve that senses is the only nerve that actually connects to each and every part of our body. Every other nerve is dedicated to a certain part, a certain organ. But this one goes everywhere. And it ends up, or it starts from three nuclei here in the brainstem, at the base of our brain, that one is in front, we call it the ventral vagal complex. That's pretty much our signaling system for motion, emotion, and communication. Basically, it's our social engagement system. It's what we do when we feel safe, and basically what helps us to be humans in everything that we define as a human activity. Then we have the middle part, which is called the sympathetic nervous system, helps us to mobilize, or so-called the system of fight or flight, but also our aggressive defensive system. And then in the back is the dorsal vagal complex, which is immobilizing, which is the system for conservation and withdrawal. It's our passive defensive system. And the way these brainstem nuclei are connected to the rest of the body through the vagal nerve is actually not symmetric. Sorry, it's a little slow. So if we were to look at the nerve fibers that come from there and connect us with the periphery, actually 3/4 of the pathways are dedicated to the input. So we have 3 times more fibers that connects us with the environment, that goes towards the brain, than the one that we tell our body what to do. Okay? So the second thing, so it's very important, all right? Why is it important? Because that means that what's predominant and the most important part, it's our neuroception. The highways that they gave for that, for the traffic, is for neuroception. And this way we can perceive our internal and external world and then control our social interactions. And every single aspect of that will have some emotional input, whether we know about it or we don't know about it. Safe, which is triggered by the perception of we are safe or in the danger zone. But also that affects our physiology too. So when we have an emotion, will trigger also a bodily response. Okay? All this is unconscious. It's automatic. All right? I hear everybody saying, well, your choice. It's a matter of will. And the truth is, there is no will if your vagal system decides that you're in the danger zone and stressed. all is automatic and involuntary. That's why stress precedes lifestyle decisions and not the other way around. Okay, and that's important. That does not mean that we cannot place ourselves to the point that we can have something to say, and I'm going to talk about that. But not if our vagal system perceives that we're in the danger zone. We have to be in the safe zone. All right, so based on those, then we have three states like they talk in the movie. We have a state that's relaxed. Basically is the ventral vagal pathway, a normal heart rate, normal muscle tone. We can be engaged, curious, creative. Hopefully, it's a healthy human being who grows and also can heal and repair if there are issues with the body. All right? And then we can have and it will be somebody like this. When you feel good, you start to be an artist, you start to be creative. All right? Then we have the mobilized version, which theoretically is the fight or flight response when you need to start walking or running. And really what this does releases adrenaline and cortisol, among others, that will actually shut down the blood supply and the internal organs that are designed for body preservations, like your kidney produces less urine, your gut stops digesting, and then mobilizes the blood towards the muscles and towards the heart. Heart beats faster, blood pressure goes up, everything is mobilized to run away from a physical danger. However, we can have mixed states. When we are in the safe zone, when we feel safe, we can actually use that to play, to be energized, to be motivated. So whether we put it a good use or not, or a running away use, depends whether we feel safe or we feel unsafe. And then what if we feel unsafe and in the danger zone? Then we triggers the fight response or the flight response. The fight response, lash out at others, yell or raise your voice, feel highly agitated or angry, be hypervigilant. Flight response, start fidgeting. Imagine a kid who's in the classroom and is bored and stressed, or he's being told, you got to stay and pay attention to everything I'm telling you, no matter what. They start fidgeting, you try to avoid the threat, have trouble sitting still, you panic, you feel trapped. Which version we're going to choose in response to a stress? This is where maybe the genetic background comes into play. All right? If I got my dad's genes, I'm going to be the aggressive type, I'm going to fight if something happens. I'm the fighter, everybody knows that, who knows me, okay? But if you got the mom version of genes, and again, sex has nothing to do with it because they can be mixed in every which way, I'm just using it as a cultural prototype here. Then mom is always listening, always focus on the kids, put up with everything. Then she'll be the fidgety, avoiding the threat, panicky, feeling trapped, worried, and anxious type. Okay, so that's if we feel unsafe. But then you have the immobilized state, which is the dorsal vagal complex. If we feel safe, our body will relax. We'll have low heart rate, low muscle tone, low energy. Emotions that are associated when we feel safe, we are blissful, we feel dreamy, we basically daydreaming, tranquil, meditative. But this can also be triggered by doing activities like yoga or breathing exercises. All right. But what if? And then we can have an interface between in this immobilized state and mobilized state. That means we have on one hand adrenaline, the fight and flight response trigger, but at the same time, when we go to the extreme, we trigger also the immobilized state, the dorsal vagal. So as an acute event, we pass out. As a chronic event, if this persists for a long time, we get depressed. All right? So between all these different activities, whether these three states are going to be put to good use or bad or not so good use for us, it all depends how this vagal system detects whether we're in the safe zone or in the unsafe danger zone based on present interactions with the environment. All right, so, and the way the system is designed, it goes from the first safety zone, which is our social engagement zone. We feel calm, settled, grounded, compassionate, mindful, and present. And this system, again, is designed for us to connect We lower our defense because we trust what's happening. Our immune system is at the maximum, protects us from invaders, and it's used to rest and restore and heal. So if we can stay in this zone, even when our body has been threatened, we'll try to heal, but it has to go into this state, all right? But also, what's most important, our ability to be humans and have compassion for the others, all right? It manifests only in safe mode, okay? But what if we start to have a stress that persists and we move from the green, zone to the yellow zone? There's a danger happening. And what if we stay there for a long time, all right? Then from the emotional side, you could be a fighter or a flighter. If you're a fighter, you're going to be angry, frustrated, irritated. Some of us, like me, every once in a while, we're going to rage, all right? Or you could be the flight version, where you just bottle in everything. You worry, you're concerned, you have particularly parents about kids or their parents, anxiety, fear, panic. And this is where your emotional sensitivity that you came genetically with will actually activate one versus another. But on the physical side, the physiology, that state is associated, remember, fight or flight. Am I going to take care of my own body right now? I got a lion that I got to run from. Everything that means repair and healing and connection is going to shut down. That's what the system is designed for. So we start to disconnect. Our defense, physical defense against other goes up, but our immune defense goes down. We have a tendency to clot. Why? Because I might get injured if I'm physically attacked. And it's part of the insulin resistance, and we burn the energy if we lose fight. So as long as this is short, no problem. It does the job. But if it's long, it's a problem. And then the system, if the stress persists, the threat persists, and we're not able to go back to the green zone, it goes to the red zone. And that's the ultimate freeze, collapse, immobility. It's all about conservation of energy. That's the dorsal vagal. I'm talking about I move from I can run or think to I can't. There is no reserve there, okay? This is a life-threatening situation, at least how it's perceived by the vagal. Emotions are related to that. We feel trapped. We prepare for death. I mean, a typical story, a mouse who is caught by a cat, even if he's not dead, will collapse and will go into this state. And will prepare the mouse to either die or hopefully, there are two versions you can interpret it. The mouse plays dead like the possum, hopefully will distract the attacker, will leave it alone. So every once in a while that might help to survive. But what if the mouse dies? Well, that's associated with a high release of endorphin, our own painkillers in the brain. So at least I have a non-suffering death. This is actually clear design for a certain purpose there, all right? But as humans, if this persists, we shut down, we feel shame, guilt, we start to dissociate, our awareness of what's happening is disconnected from what we are doing. As a matter of fact, the system is designed, so don't get busy and you don't have to deal with all this. And we start to do all kinds of contradictory things in our life that we don't understand. This is part of what's called the Stockholm syndrome, right? Nobody understands why somebody who's been trapped for a long time with an abuser suddenly looks like it's connected, but actually it's a survival mechanism that is not controlled voluntarily by that person. It's dissociating, okay, to try to survive. You get numb, you get major depression, allows raised space threshold, and you feel helpless. So these three states, they move from one to another, depending how chronic is the stress and how intense. And again, they're out of our voluntary control. The only place where we have voluntary control if we're in the green zone, okay, and feel safe. So when we feel safe, we're capable of being generous. We have empathy for ourselves, but also for the others. We have true generosity, which is altruism. We actually want to help somebody, not because we're compelled to, but because we want to, and we can afford without side effect. Growth and compassion. And what if we don't feel safe? Our sense of self-preservation trumps everything else. So we become selfish, desperate, we start to have aggressive behavior, we snap at the others, and are inevitable for most of us, okay? So basically, in each side of us, there's a Hulk, all right, all right, and there's a Bruce Banner. If we are safe, we're the sweetest, most creative, intelligent scientist or artist. If we don't feel safe, we just want to either kill or be killed. Okay? So, and you know, what is important in the movie, there was a system that's mentioned, it's called co-regulation. That's actually very important. This is actually the substrate, the science and the physiology behind us as social human beings. No man is an island is probably one of the most absolute truths about our whole physiology. Phase one, but requires two things in order to be able to co-regulate each other, okay? One is, as a human, to influence another human, we have to have a face-to-face communication. That's how the system was developed for 6.5 million years. All right, with people that are safe to us, in other words, and what has been known in the past is the survival of the fittest is the one who has dominance and aggressiveness. That's actually does not what made us survive. What made us survive, the fittest, as humans, is the social aspect of us. If you think about humans compared to other animals in the nature, we are actually not very powerful with anything. There's no way what we have clear is not our size, or fierceness, or physical abilities that allow us to survive in an environment where when we appear on the scene, we are one of the fewest size and the least powerful, actually, compared to other animals. Okay? It's actually, according to Theodosius Dobzhansky, who was a Ukrainian American geneticist and evolution biologist, turns out we selected for features that the fittest actually may also be gentlest, because survival often requires mutual help and cooperation. It's how we get together that makes the difference. So we need a phase one is actually face-to-face communication. Okay? Of course, that system was not prepared for the way we communicate today. I mean, the last 100 years, we communicate just by voice without seeing each other through a telephone. I mean, we communicate when play games with computer with the other person without necessarily seeing each other. Sometimes you do see each other. FaceTime video, it's a little better updated version, but believe it or not, proximity is what activates full and large scale our safety net. You have to have all that. So the next phase, that's what I'm about to say, that actually FaceTime cannot give you, although FaceTime can give you a lot. Let's say somebody who's disabled cannot get out of their room, you know, not having anything, having this, being able to communicate with friends and relatives, it's a big improvement for that person. For somebody else who can do all this, it's a limitation, okay? Because we also, to have a full impact in terms of this co-regulation in a positive way, we also have to be able to do intimacy and physical contact, okay? Basically, just hugs or being close to each other and seeing each other expression, hearing well. What it does, you know, it releases the oxytocin system. It's not just oxytocin. I'm just using this one because it's probably easier to understand. It's a connection hormone, okay, that provides ability to pair and bond. I mean, the first stage that you learn about is when the mom actually is the highest release of oxytocin is actually during labor, all right? Not only that it helps the mom to expel the baby by contracting the uterus, but the moment the baby is out, despite the stress and the pain the mom has, the first instinct is to grab the baby and hold it. That physical contact between mom and baby continues to release oxytocin, both in the baby and in the mother. All right? And it's oxytocin, turns out it's also a healing and repair hormone. We have now a lot of research that show that helps to repair the brain, the heart, the gut system, the immune system. It's anti-inflammatory, anti-diabetes. And for those who have watched my lecture from June, I talk a lot about what's happening with the food. It's about mitochondria. It's essential for mitochondrial regeneration. And mitochondria inside the cell does what the brain does for the rest of the body. All right, so every cell and every organ and our whole body is equipped using similar principles and having an equivalent element. So basically, it's literally that, look at these faces. Look, this face, we smile with the whole face. It's dynamic. When you see that, that's connection. That releases oxytocin, just that. Turns out not just our visual expression of the face that influences us, okay? But also the way we talk. When I see this, my inner ear muscles right now, and I'm focusing on each and every one of you, if I see a smile, my inner muscle start to contract, automatically triggered by the vagal, for my social engagement system, to adjust the frequency in the middle range, the melody kind of stuff, which is so I can hear the voice. I see that, I think you're about to talk. I'm going to change the way I perceive the reality, both sounds and visual. And that's what's correlation. I regulate my emotional state based on yours and vice versa. And oxytocin actually is literally not just a love hormone. It can actually help mend a broken heart, literally. They took hearts who are failing, they're very weak. Our hearts try to regenerate. We have cardiac stem cells in them, okay? But they are in an environment where they cannot do their job. You take them out, you give them oxytocin, immediately those cells, from being able to do nothing, start to come together and start beating together and form a heart. Then you give it back to the animal. Now, we don't have equivalent in humans, but it shows you evolutionary what's the purpose of that, okay? So being able to achieve that state with somebody allows our body to actually start heal itself. All right, doesn't mean it can do it depending what it is by itself, but it's part of that. So ways to increase oxytocin, and I don't want you to be fixated on it. I'm just using this as a system and as a model. There's lots more than that. But sensation, physical touch, social interaction with positive people who are also in the safe zone. Volunteering, act of kindness, these things that everybody knows make you feel happy. They cost nothing. I don't have to tell you. Exercising outside, Mother Nature, meditation, mindfulness, music, playing with others, safe. Have a good laugh, watching a comedy. Spend time with a pet. There is a reason why they're called support animals. Why? Both dogs and us, we evolved together and we train them to support me, and in exchange we support them. All right, we co-regulate. All right. So, but co-regulation goes both ways. Doesn't just go, if you're in the safe zone, you're going to influence me being in the safe zone and being happy. It goes the other way around too. If you're not in the safe zone, and I see that you're in danger, the fear connects us. So you can transmit how you feel to me. If I'm attracted and I stay either in physical or emotional proximity to you, and I'm tuning to you. Okay? All right? So look at these faces, and look at these faces, and look at this face. What do you see? Flat face. Look at the other face. You see how they can't smile, all right? But we get flat affect. When I see that face, that doesn't create any safety zone, all right? I mean, you can say a lot that these people are really stressed out, duh. But also you can say, I'm doing that to move you out of the safe zone, move you into the danger zone. Why? When we go in the danger zone, what happens to our human skills and ability to think goes away. Okay? It's by design. That's what politicians do. That's how they get their job. And we say, that person is an amazing politician. They know how to do this. There's nothing else to it. How about this? Hey, I got you out of the danger. I put you in the danger zone. I know you feel terrible and you're about to crash, but I got a solution for you. I need to get you back. Vote for me. I can smile. Hey, it's safe. I got you back. Okay? But look at the smile they have. It's a zombie smile. It's only the lower face, because that you can control voluntary. It's not the real. Look at the smile on the other one. Everything is open, especially the upper face. Okay? So it's by design. And there is nothing, I know, it's election time, so I'm not going to say one is better than another. It doesn't matter. All I'm saying is, I'm warning you, what can give you vibes of being in danger, whether you like it or not, depending what's happening around us and how you can stay out of it. All right? So, it's not what we know, but what we feel that matters. It's not what we say, but how we say and the face we show that matter. Not only that, if we are safe, we tune into middle frequency sound-like melody sounds. Think about, you see your dog when you come home. What are you going to say? Who is the good boy? Immediately changes. What about if you see a baby? Oh, you're so cute, you're so... No. That's what makes us feel safe, and the baby or the animal. Now, I'm a politician, I want you to pay attention. Voice become monotonous, loud, moves into the danger zone. So, and the same the receiver once you go there, okay? So, what we need to learn is like it was says in the movie, the Polyvagal Theory, and in this book that I highly recommend, Polyvagal World, which is really, this theory was created by a fantastic scientist, and I'm going to show you the books at the end, but basically what it poses is that it's not a problem with our system when we're in the safe or mobilized or immobilized zone. It's when we're stuck in one part there is a problem. If we're stuck in the mobilized and the stress moves you there, then it can go only one way, okay, if the stress keeps going. And it's these traumas that cause that. The trauma is not necessarily what happens to us. You can take two people who are exposed to the same, stress, and they can have two different reactions, okay? So, I remember when I was 20 years old, no, 21, that was my second year of medical school. And that was during when we had, in December, middle of December, we went on the streets and we pretty much eventually started a revolution that turned down Ceausescu. Before then, I had 1 year of exposure in the army. So I used to plenty with gunshots. Well, going on the street, I still have the same problem. Despite of me being exposed, why? When I heard the gunshot, when I was in training in the army, I knew it was safe. But then it took me by surprise what happened with the next 6 weeks, that you can hear the gunshot from anywhere, unexpected, anytime. And our job as the students was to pick up the bodies, get them to the hospital, take care of them. And ever since I came in this country, my most unpleasant experience is 4th of July fireworks. I can tell you. Even now, I hear it, immediately I get back that memory of guns, when I hear. Why? Fireworks depends on which one it is, but it triggers that in me. Now, that's not the same for anybody else who's been born in this country, who's been exposed since they were born. It's like, what are you talking about? This is fun. I can never perceive that as fun. I'm not in the safe zone. I try. And I do it for the others. I just go inside my room and I put my headphones and do something else. So again, the experience, it depends on the context, what happened before. All right? So now we can look at neuroscientists, they study this, and we pretty much know almost every part of the organ where this happens in the brain. What we don't have a good idea is, we didn't have on the polyvagal theory how to put them together, okay? But bottom line is, there's a conscious perception of it, and there's a subconscious. There's our vagal, polyvagal nuclei, all the vagal nerve input that then sends from here, from the brainstem level, to the midbrain level, which is what we call the limbic system, and then eventually to all the way up there outside what we call the wise guys, the prefrontal cortex, where we make the decisions, the voluntary decisions. And in order to understand why I react different to 4th of July fireworks than somebody else who is here, you have to understand that I have a different memory, emotional memory, than the other person, all right? And there are two kinds of memories. There is explicit memory, which we acquire after age 2. Most of us, we don't remember anything even at 2. But let's say some of us are better than others, but we start remembering events from our life when we were 4 or 5 years old. So it's acquired late. And what that means is we can recall the details. When it happened, what we're doing, it's a whole context, recollection of the memory, okay? And those come later in life. But early in life, as a matter of fact, since fetal life, we have implicit memory that automatically comes with the emotions. Those are automatically associated with emotions. It's unconscious. It's actually what forms our beliefs later on. And if they're remembered, that means it's down there in your brain somewhere. It comes back in a different context, which you can't remember it as a context. All right, so, but you cannot figure what exactly happened. All right, and now I got lucky that when, for 6 weeks, I was in the middle of a war, I was 21 years old, and I could put that in explicit memory. But if that happened when I was 6 months old, I would have been forever shocked for the rest of my life when I hear a gunshot wound. And I could never figure out where it came from. All right, so I'm trying to make a point here, okay? A lot of what we think or believe and emotions that are brought by certain experiences, if you do not have a special, you just feel like it's coming out of nowhere. No, it's coming from somewhere. We're just not interpreting it right. That's all, okay? So the difference between explicit and implicit memory, okay? And they're actually located in the same part where I said the wise part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, that has two sides, a medial one and the lateral one. And the explicit memory goes into the lateral one. That's the guy that tells us, in the present, I have a problem. I need to plan which version is going to give me a better decision for this or that, okay? And I can compare the facts from today. So I'm using my old memory to assess the situation today, to see if that's any good for me, use for me or not, to explain the situation or make a decision. But the implicit memory goes in the same part into we call this the watchtower, if you will. So one is the timekeeper, the other one is with the conscious one, where the wheel is, and then the other one is the watchtower. It's emotion-driven, all right? Those are the implicit memories. This one is fast-acting. This is designed to protect me from danger. I don't have time to think, there's a gun, duck, okay? So that's what it does. So 95%, if it's something fast and it feels like immediate danger, we're going to use our emotional version, the implicit memories, not the explicit. That takes time to properly assess situation, but also takes being in present of what's happening and not disconnected. All right, so what's interesting is if you have acute stress, you have increased immediate, actually that stimulates our explicit, the one that we're going to remember the context. It's actually helping, all right? So here's the deal, all right? I can tell you, when I was 7 years old, I remember going to school, crossing the street, and in a split of a second, of course, I wanted to jailwalk, all right? I ignored the red light. I started to walk, and I don't know what happened to me, but I literally looked at the left and I stopped. And the bus literally just went in front of me with 50 miles an hour and almost touched my face. All right? So how do I have that memory? One exposure. One exposure. And trust me, there are not many things I remember since I was 7 years old. Point is, you can have one exposure. If it's strong negative emotional event, you will remember it for the rest of your life. Actually, that's the basis of learning. Everybody knows if you enjoy where you're studying, you're going to remember it very well. And you can cut in the frequency how many times you have to study that. Okay? That's it. And particularly if it's negative emotion. Okay? So that's designed to help us, having an emotion associated with it. However, if this happens chronic, the stress, it does exactly the opposite. It says, wait a minute, you brain, you have too many things going on. I got to protect you. This is like a recurrent event. We got to go get by with your life. So what it does, it suppresses actually our awareness center and the part that is smart if we have chronic. That's the job of the cortisol, the norepinephrine. Doesn't mean it shouldn't be remembered. It's still going to be registered as a negative emotion. It's going to be there. But it's going to take over you. Why? Because if I don't involve me in the present making a decision, because I'm too slow and I could die if I wait for me to process that, then it'll be all automatic. It's a blast from the past. You make decisions in that second while you're multitasking that can lead you to something you may not recognize, while in that moment it's a good thing. Long term could be a bad thing. And that's what it does. So not only our brain, but also our body and immune system have cumulative memory of our prior exposure to emotional stress, okay, whether it's implicit or explicit. And to move from that state of explicit emotions, which I can help us to live in the present, make an informed decision, a will-based decision, to implicit, all it takes is to move from feeling in the green, safe zone, to the danger zone. Once we are there, there is no will, there is no decision that we think we're making there. The decision is being made for us by the vagal system, based on prior implicit memories. And that's how you're going to react. And that's the idea here. So the system, if is designed to help us, if you go through those danger zones, just short bursts, it's protective. It gives us at the best possible peak to react to that. But not if it's long duration and all the time. All right? And it actually moves us from being socially connected in a healthy state, conscious, creative, give our physical body ability to rest, restore, and heal if we had an injury or a disease, and actual immune system work and take care of viruses and bacteria, moves us into a social disconnect, unconscious, which is unconscious defensive behavior. It depresses our immune system, causes tachycardia, and I can tell you, if you come like this with me, and somebody has heart failure, the faster your heart rate, the less you're going to live. We know that. All right? And then if this continues for a long time, it actually puts you literally into an immobilized fear exhaustion state. We know about depression. What people don't know, depression is always associated with diabetes because it causes insulin resistance. Why? The body wants to preserve everything, stores, releases insulin, and basically stops you from burning calories and reduces your immune system. Right? And you slow down. The first symptom usually is you faint. So when you faint, you activate your dorsal vagal nerve, and it says you need to immobilize. You're exhausted. Stop doing what you're doing. It's not working. All right? And people who are depressed are the ones who get infections. All right? That's why, because the immune system is down. Actually, we know that if you had COVID and you had major adverse childhood events, you're more likely to die from COVID and also get it than if you didn't. If you work in a hospital like we did, or nurses or doctors, you're more likely to get, if you get it, to die also. Why? Working in a hospital, particularly in COVID times, it's always, I can tell, all nurses can tell, is the most possible stressful environment you can have. You work with humans who have problems. We work under high time pressure. It's not a very rewarding job while you're doing it. It's maybe after, okay? So that was part of that. It lowers our defense system. So basically what moves us into this state that can go only up if it continues prior trauma, which is remembered as implicit memory, and triggered by the current events that look similar to what we have as I just hear the sound of the gun. I do not know if that's a gun or not. but the fireworks sound the same, all right? And that's what happens. I interpret it as a gun, and I duck, or I don't feel good, all right? And that's the problem is, ideally you would like to work on creating a resilient state where you can move from these states very easy and not feeling all the time in danger zone. So what makes us being resilient? Playing with each other, all right? It doesn't matter what you play, touching each other. Well, there are schools that are forbidding kids when they play to touch each other because they can harm themselves. That actually goes against to every principle we have for resilience, okay? And in the study I was telling about, if you have at least 4 of these ACEs, you are 240% more likely you're going to get heart disease, cancer, 200%, drug, you're 10 times more likely to be addicted to anything, okay? Stroke, diabetes, suicide attempt, 11-fold, obesity, and depression. And you have at least 4 of those, you live 20 years less. All right, so the way it works, according to the Child Development Unit from Harvard, which is quoted actually by Dr. Gabor Mate in his book, is that the way we make our brain, it starts as early as before birth, continues into the adulthood, and either we can have in childhood a sturdy foundation, or we can have a fragile foundation. And then everything else that comes after that influences all the health, learning, and behavior. So our childhood and our exposures is what brings on whatever genes we have based on our personal experiences to go one way or another. And the single most important that influences that development, whether we feel frail or whether we have a sturdy foundation, is the relationship with the parents. Okay? There is some truth to, well, you can have your mom to blame for. Okay? There is some truth to that. It's not everything, and I'll explain why. But in the same time, because whatever coping mechanisms that child developed when it grew up, in response to modulated by a relationship with the parents or the significant other, it's actually defense, good coping mechanism in the childhood. Unfortunately, it becomes a problem when that becomes beliefs and you move to adulthood. And that's the problem, okay? And influences that. So what Gabor Mate says is that before we create the world in our mind, the world creates our mind. And we have no saying into it when we are children. How we interpret the world, if there is a stressful stimulus or a safe stimulus, immediately, if it's a stressful one, the child looks at the mother or dad to interpret it, because there has no self-regulation mechanism. It's pure co-regulation. If the parent is there and will give a certain interpretation, that's before the kid has any chance to have a will and say, I'm going to agree with that or I'm not going to agree. It will take on whatever the message comes from the adult. And it's like your program in PC and Windows in the childhood. If the adult world is going to be all Windows, then you're going to be just fine. But if the adult world is Mac and Apple, and you keep functioning in Windows, it's not going to work. And our job as adults is to see the difference and start working on it, because we can repair that. That's all. All right, so this is important. So I'm going to show you why that's important. This is another little 2-minute movie.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And She gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Okay? So we can be traumatized.
Babies this young are
Our emotions and beliefs as adults are shaped during early childhood interactions with the parents. But it's not just necessarily what bad happened to you as a trauma that you can identify. It's actually what it didn't happen to you. That's called neglect. If the mom did not continue to ignore, or simple, we're busy, we gotta go to work, the baby is gonna be disappointed. Just a parent is missing because they have to work. It's a problem, particularly if then after that they are thrown into a daycare center. There is 1 to 10 ratio between the adult, the caregivers, and the kids. And the baby will be stuck. That's not mom's problem. That's not parents' fault. It's a toxic society, so we have to both work to be able to provide. Okay? Just that missing, because that's the only way that's the way how we develop our brain. We look at the parents when we grow up to not only tell us what to do, but also to feel safe and develop. Okay? So that's very important. So trauma happens when bad things happen to us, who are used to the big trauma, right? Physical, bullying, sexual abuse, you name it, discrimination. But also the good things that were supposed to happen didn't happen. That's multi-trauma. And the repair, that's actually more important, didn't happen. The mom went back to an interactive face from the flat face. But the mom sometimes cannot go back there just because he's not there for that. All right? And we actually have a horrible experiment that actually was done in Romania. It's famous now. It's the institutionalized Romanian orphans. This started, Romania in 1989, when we had our revolution, had the highest number of children institutionalized in the country, over 100,000. Basically, mothers just dropping the kids as soon as they're born for the state to take care of it. This actually was started from Ceausescu in 1966, when he gave a decree that's called Decree 770. What he wanted to do, He wanted to have many institutionalized kids and a large population because then they would be submissive to what he wanted to do. That decree state forbidden actually contraceptions, actually encourage every family was supposed to have 5 kids. It's the opposite from what China did. And then as a consequence of, and they will go after you and penalize you, have to pay money if you don't get to the 5 kids for a while. And actually we have a say, the kids that were born after 66, including me in 68, we were the decree kids, okay? And if a consequence of that is that, unfortunately, after 2 or 3 kids, very few people can afford to take care of them. So mothers and parents start to drop the kids as soon as they are born for the institutions to take care of it. The problem is that the system was bankrupt. Nobody would take care of it. So these poor kids, there were 3 or 6 caregivers for 50 or 80 of them. So when scientists from Harvard went to study this after the revolution, these kids, do you see how the baby started to act and try to touch mom when she started to put the flat face? So these kids immediately will attack any person who will visit from outside, try to physically attach to that person and not let go. We are designed to attach. And if we don't have it, we will do anything for that. Okay? So basically, nature designed emotional circuits. Emotions are essential for our brain growth, but also to survive. Survival as child, but also shape our relationship as an adult. One of the greatest child psychologists, Gordon Nuffield, said we all grow older, but we don't all grow up. So to really raise a child then would be to bring that child to his and her full potential as a human being. He also said that the greatest gift parents can give to their children is for the parents to be happy. Because then the children will co-regulate into that. But also, when parents are not happy, the anxiety from the parents goes to the kids and moves them into the danger zone. And what do they do in danger zone? They stop growing. They stop developing. All right? So we are wired and attached and connect with each other. We have a child to properly grow has 4 essential needs to mature. Again, we grow and then mature. We don't grow, we don't mature. What is the biggest insult we can give to somebody our age? Oh, you're acting so immature. All right? So we need to have a deep sense of connection with those responsible for us. That's attachment. Needs to be secure. The child has to be loved unconditional. If we take the child, we put him to sleep, and we ignore their crying because we're going to train the child to sleep for 8 hours on its own, that's the worst possible offense you can do that. The child learns that the environment is not secure, the love is not secure. That actually goes against anything that's normal, how we're designed. Putting them on the corner, ignoring them when they did something bad, we discipline them. That's actually not right. The child should not work to earn his right to be who he is, okay? But also the child should be able to freely express their emotions. They could be positive, they could be negative. It should not feel they're being punished for that. Because if you don't express your emotion, you bottle them up. And then you start to make decisions on your own that you don't know where it leads to later on. All right? Why? When you express your emotion, you learn that it's safe to be vulnerable and you can actually grow. And then you can mature because you've done a lot of trials and error in the childhood. Anybody who learns how to play piano, the first time they try that particular piece is terrible. Then they make 100 mistakes, they try 100 times, then it's perfect. If I were to assess only at the end, it looks like, oh my God, this guy's so good at this. But if I were to have assessed the first time he tried, it looked terrible. Well, that's the only how you can mature to learn a piece, to play it. You have to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to do trial and error without being punished, so then you can mature and get good at relationship with the environment. Otherwise, you switch to invulnerable, which means I don't want to take any chance. Therefore, you'll have minimal experience. Therefore, you'll always be stuck at the first or second time when you try to play piano. You'll never acquire the competence to do that. That's how the brain works and develop the circuits. So it's very important to be able not to be worried, to be vulnerable. But to get that, you have to be in the safe state. All right? So the experience of free play, then once you have the safety, the ability to express yourself as a child without being punished, then the child will do what the child does, play, which is part of growing. Sometimes they may hurt a little bit, sometimes they don't, but play, gender-free, interactive, engaging joy and imagination person to person. Okay? So, and we learn now there's a part of our brain that integrates all this. We just didn't know how to give what exactly function will do. Now, ironically, it's called insula, which in Latin means island. It looks like an island, but it's anything but an island in terms of its function. It literally integrates every single signal from our body that was sent by the vagal nerve to above, okay? Everything we feel from muscle, joints, or we call somatic, pain, emotions, gut, visceral organs, immune system, everything gets integrated in that particular place. And it's that place that interprets whether we are safe or not. All right, so now we have an anatomical function for the functional circuits that I was telling you about. And then that insula, all right, is activated and fires up. And when you have like this, so this is, for example, my niece, who is a year and a half old, and 2 weeks ago, her mom was putting up some Halloween decorations, and suddenly she got scared by one of them. All right? And that's what happens. She said, I'm scared. What do you think she did? First thing, look at mom. So now we got two choices. You can be scared for life if your mom is not there to regulate in a proper way. Or if the mom is there, say, don't worry about it. I'll walk with you. Look, it's safe. It's just for fun. Then it goes away. That's what, that child has a gut instinct. That's how we're designed to. We're supposed to listen to it. All right? But if the mom is not there, that's not going to be good. Then if we had something that scared us and we did not have the parent to regulate us, then actually and we have repetitive exposure to that stimulus, then actually this insula integrates an output to the rest of the system. The stress hormone system, the immune system will suppress and increase the adrenaline. And that's the substrate for chronic stress, for repetitive stimulation. So, ignoring our negative emotions, if the mom was not there to say it's safe, and yes, it's okay to cry, I understand you're scared, let it go without being punished. I also know, I can tell you, when my patient recently told me she had exactly the same experience that she remembers very well. And the dad pretty much pushed her out, turned off the light, let her in the dark to go by herself so she can get trained to ignore it. She still remembers it. That did not go well. That's not a proper response. Okay? So basically, we grow our brain based on two needs that are embedded in us. One is the attachment. The moment we are born, why? We can survive. And the attachment to whoever is our caregiver, which is mom, dad, or grandma, doesn't matter, whoever is there, is going to be the similarly important. They will regulate and will interpret for us what we're going to learn for the rest of our life, how to work with. The other part is the authenticity. The authenticity is the self. We develop that when we get closer to teenager years. Now we start to have a will, counter will. Actually the authenticity starts when at 2 years old. Remember the rebel no, when they start saying no? That's a sign that we start to develop ourselves. And if we don't practice saying no, how on earth are we going to recognize who we are? Okay? If we don't say no, we'll never say yes. That's part of maturing and becoming independent, eventually independent in adult life. But that comes later. And they're both survival skills. And the problem is when, in general, they're supposed to go together. If we attach properly, we can actually become authentic and autonomous properly and mature to live and function independent. If we don't attach properly, then if there is a conflict between attachment and authenticity, attachment will always win. Okay? That means is absence of a secure attachment triggers a panic grief system and impairs the ability, it puts us into the danger mode. I mean, we need to, no matter what, as a child, make sure we can survive. So even if my mom or dad told me to do something I don't want to do and it hurts my feeling, I'm going to bottle up my feelings and I'm going to listen to them. That's just that. All right? So when our brains are under care, and it doesn't have to be an active stimuli that the parents told you to do something you don't want to do consistently, but also could be something that the parents are just not there when the kid is stressed, whatever they were playing, or in daycare, or there's not enough adults to kids ratio to actually address the issue, and it will be the same message, by neglect and by missing in action. All right? Then the kid is allowed to interpret themselves what's happening to survive. And you learn the best way is to ignore yourself and do what you got to do to survive. All right? And that's all integrated by our survival system, which is in amygdala. So it is true that parents are responsible for their children, okay? But they did not create the world that we live in. Okay? In other words, it sounds like, oh, it's all your mom or your dad's fault. Not always. All right? So in this country now, 25% of women have to go to work within 2 weeks of delivering a baby because they have to work. Okay? The baby needs the physical close proximity with the mom at least the first 2 years. Okay? I can tell you, I went back and asked my mom, and apparently it was 7 months for each of us. So I guess we got enough to survive. Okay? But bottom line is, in traditional societies, it's up to 3-4 years. Okay? The real one, when then those kids are very attached and very mature adults that make informed decisions. So it's a society where you have to work within 2 weeks of delivering the baby. Then that's going to be, neglect. Now baby doesn't know why, but it's going to interpret, mom abandoned me. And it's going to start to kick in different mechanisms of survival than the ones will be if the mom interpreted them for them properly. All right? I can tell you I was guilty of that. So my son was born, first year being here at Emory was part of my training. The first 8 years of life, I would come home probably after 9 o'clock. I'd be with him maybe a little bit on a Saturday or on a Sunday. It was just part that I had to, so I was a workaholic. 24 hours available for my patients, 24 hours available for the hospital. So what does your son message get? What message does he get, my son, when he sees me that? That he's not important. He don't matter. But on top of that, what do you think is going to happen to his mom when I'm not there, but when he goes to sleep? All the stress is like mom feels like she's parenting by herself. And both mom and me are exposed to the same stress in society. She has to work too. So then there is anxiety and stress between the two, mom and dad. And then the kid, that's a double whammy, so to speak. That's not going to be good. In my mind, I was a good parent. At least for a while. But then I see things that my son is very sensitive and he reacts in a certain way, often very brutal and aggressive, because then when he grew up, he started to express himself. All right? And I don't know, why is this out of proportion? Well, no, what did I do to you? That's what I did. I was missing in action. Okay? Was it a voluntary thing? Well, in my mind, it was involuntary. But I had some fault with that. But bottom line is, don't blame the parents. They have the challenge of raising their children in a toxic social culture. And I show you what happened. All right? And then all you need is not being there. And the baby feels neglected. And then 30 years later, there's something else that makes you feel like you're abandoned, not loved, not wanted, whatever is the significant other things. And then you default back to what happened when you actually been feeling abandoned by your dad or mom. or whoever was the significant other was taking care of you. Okay? And it comes back. That's the trigger. And then we move into that zone. And everybody knows who's been fighting with their significant other for a while or not having a good, productive relationship. You can stay in that zone for a long, long time. And this can only go, stop either when people are divorced or they reconcile and they go back. But this is a serious issue, okay, which you may not have a good adaptive mechanism to adapt for if you're still brought by your prior childhood memories, which were in a different context, because you will not understand what's happening. And I've witnessed it, firsthand. So trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. It narrows our view of the world. Remember, when you go in survival mode, you're unable to see anything else. It's your way or the highway. Whoever makes you run away from whatever is hurting you, because you're hurting. All right? It can restrict your ability to develop and grow. It's internalized. You're going to feel shame and worthlessness as a child. Why? Well, the baby is narcissistic. Doesn't have a self-control, self-regulated system. If things go well, all great. If things go bad, it's my fault. So if they get a message from the parent, either active or not being there, that something went bad, and there is no explanation, they will think it's their fault. So it's my fault, I need to do better. So I'm going to feel guilty and shame about what I've done. That's just a natural survival mechanism, and worthless. But also, if you have those tendencies to go when you're exposed to others, then you shapes how you enter a relationship as an adult, And the worst part is not only it disconnects you, makes you less likely to be able to co-regulate with other adults, but also disconnect you from yourself. Because when I say is my fault, I should feel guilty, shameless. What do? I suppress myself. I'm going to ignore what my gut is telling me I need to do. It's all my fault. I'm going to just focus what I need to do to convince the others I'm worth of love, and I'm going to do everything. I'm going to put in all the work about that. And I'm going to feel terrible if I do anything wrong to the other guys. Okay? So that's the problem. And so what Gabor Mate states is that all pathologies, really, that we know, at least the mental stress, begin as an adaptation that's rooted in trauma triggered and aggravated by an ongoing emotional stress. And what seemed to be genetically determined, it's our emotional sensitivity. So if you look at families where 6 or 7 children, there's always one that will be the one who somehow gets to be in charge of the other kids, okay, and take on the parenting role. And there might be 2 if there are 7 or 8, depending on their emotion. But the one that takes on that, it's always the most sensitive one. It's the one who is an artist, and that's how you identify that. Okay? And that's probably genetically driven. Okay? But it's your emotion. Clear, you look at me, I'm not the emotional sensitive version. I can tell I'm not an artist either. Okay? I'm more abstract minded and in a different breed. But I also know my sister is very different than me. Okay? She's definitely the artist in the family. So that's what genes do to us. So before we create the world, again, the world creates our mind in a way that we have no saying, then just get programmed into us for adult life. And if it's programmed right, we learn the proper operating system that is the same in adult, we're good. If we didn't, we'll have to go back and reassess that. So if you were to look at personality traits for patients, people who develop also chronic physical illnesses, disease, they fit the profile of a nice person that avoid confrontation. My way was always, and I'm quoting this from Gabor Mate's book, The Myth of Normal, my way was always being the caretaker, being needed a lot of time on my own. So somebody who feels that shame and guilt because something bad happened, the parent missing was not there to help them, they will want to be a caretaker. They just look at all time to justify why they should be loved and wanted by looking outside. All right? And I never wanted a conflict with anyone. And I always had to be in charge. So you become a perfectionist trying to control the environment because this way you secure the connection with the others. I was ashamed a lot for my feeling as a child. I was very sensitive and I cried a lot. And there's always fears of not being good enough leads to perfectionism. All right? By the way, there's nothing wrong with perfectionism as a quality to try to do a good job for a certain thing. But there's a difference between trying to do something as good as possible because you choose to, and particularly is important, an important feature for what you're going to produce, versus being compulsive and compelled to do no matter what in everything you do, which is not you. It's not even a voluntary decision. There's nothing wrong to do a good job with anything you do when you choose so. What's wrong is be compulsive, okay? The same way fears of disappointing others, people pleasing. What's wrong with being nice to people? Nothing wrong with that. If you choose to, depending how people behave with you. But you cannot choose to be nice to everybody, including the ones that hurt you. That will be compulsive. That's not altruism, okay? If it hurts you, and you know it's going to hurt you. So, and you had no choice into that decision. That was embedded in our brain since we were a child. So it's called autonomous self-sufficiency. What Gabor Mate is saying that these traits originate in subconscious coping mechanisms from childhood, developed during the reverse parent-child relationship. So it's an unfortunate situation and extremely counterproductive for the brain development when the child has to become a parent at a young age. Doesn't mean it's not going to do a good job. It's going to do a fabulous job. You'll be probably way the best parent if you can imagine in terms of when their turn comes. But that's not the point. The point is they're never safe and free to play and engage into a safe zone with other kids and be able to mature and be able to actually develop themselves. And so because we need, seek, and become caregivers in adult life while suppressing our needs and negative emotions, if you become a parent as a child, you'll have to suppress other things that you know they are not right and they hurt you. And you become a professional suppressor, then we get into trouble. All right, so this particular patient I'm telling you, I told you the story how after 20 years she was end stage everything. After somehow I was able to get to her and ask her, what made you change your mind? So, well, you made that phone call on a Saturday. And she was like, what kind of doctor does that? There is one human being who cares in this world about me. You know, all along she was looking to be helped. Her body wants, she wants it, but she needed support, unconditional support. She took it. And that's what made the difference, according to her. So, and she was able to get and cure her diabetes as of July. So then a few months, passed by. 3 months later, I get a message from her, Doc, I cannot stop eating. I'm hungry all the time, and I'm craving sugar and bad food. I started to drink Diet Coke, but cannot stop. Keep gaining weight, so she gained back 20 pounds. I'm afraid, I don't want to go back to my prior bad eating habits and miserable life. Okay? So then, she was begging me to give her Ozempic, give him some. We tried, we went through different things. She doesn't tolerate them. Give me something. What can I do? So I can't stop eating. So I immediately picked up the phone and I said, what's stressing you out? Because she was having symptoms of heart failure, chest pressure, anxiety attacks, panic attacks, short of breath all the time, almost feeling like when she was in the hospital last time. But I knew the objective, that's not what it is, and I saw how the weight was going gradually up. Also knew that she had no choice because she's stressed again. So here's what came out when I talked to her, that I didn't know until I asked. Turns out her daughter had a baby in July, and the daughter has a job. So the baby goes and lives often with the mom, with the patient, and she doesn't sleep at night. I mean, she's not equipped for what young people are equipped for. And also, the baby wants his mom. It's going to cry until it will get the mom. And it's going to stop. So sleep deprivation, exhaustion from baby crying, constant chest pressure, not responding to diuretics. Her son then moved back with her and is for whatever reason, stressed out or not, he's not interested to get a job. It's her healthy food that she tried to prepare from literally living off food stamps. And basically, suddenly, she's back to where she was before she met me. Takes care of her island. And there's another 7 years old granddaughter that goes in and out. So, I said, look, this is a source of your chest pain. That's why you're gaining weight. That's why you can't stop eating. This is what's happening with your stress. She tells me she's a perfectionist, but she also will never ask for help. She tells me she can't go to sleep until she tidies everything in the house before she goes to sleep. I'm talking about if it takes 2 hours at 11 p.m., she will do it before she can actually allow herself to go to sleep. Okay? And she doesn't see, she can't stop it. It's not like she has a choice. And she says, I said, well, so what are you going to do? She says, I love my kids, but I don't like my kids anymore. I cannot say no to them. And they know that. Why? Because my mom was never there for me. And I promised them I will never do that. So that's her belief. Okay? So look what happens. We activate the stress system, aggravates the heart failure symptoms. Everything that's supposed to cause diabetes, the same stress hormone, causes diabetes and weight gain, and you eat more. And stress and sleep deprivation just keeps perpetuating the cycle with stress hormones. And that's what's happening. All right? And the question is, why is she going back to craving the wrong food? Okay? Well, I showed you last time in June that those ultra-processed food, they are designed to do that with everything they put on. For taste, all these food additives and concentration of vegetables, they're fried and what we call the umami taste. They're designed for taste, smell, texture, palatability for addiction. They know the science. It's called the bliss point. Okay? And we actually know now that 15% of adults are addicted and 12% of kids to that. The question is, who gets addicted to that? I can tell I like it. And there are moments when I'm stressed out, or colleagues or nurses in the clinic, they see me, and somebody bees, I tell them, please don't bring any more sweets, because then I'll go out, I'll hit the road. But once I get home, I don't do that. So I know I can afford to be. But she has no choice. She's one of those who are addicted. And the question is why? All right? Stress. That's prior stress, ongoing stress. That's what lowers our defenses and makes us do that. Okay? And if you want, I'll go through this circuit. The bottom line is I told you about this ANS starts here in the vagal nuclei. That's the first level in the brain, the brainstem. This signals, when you have stress, to this middle brain, which is the limbic system. And the essence of that sensor is amygdala. That's the anxiety, what we perceive. Once that amygdala is fired up, you're done. You're going to be stressed and you feel anxious. Okay? So then amygdala immediately will send signals and will block the ability for you to process the information of what's happening. You basically, we become dumb in that moment. All right? Bang. The prefrontal cortex and the voluntary will decision is done. There is no such thing as will when you are stressed out. All right? And then amygdala will say, okay, you stop, because this is too fast. We need to react. Let's look in some old memory. What is it from the old memory that's going to tell me that was useful in the past? Oh, I know what calms me down. Give me some sugar. Oh, give me some fried French fries. Give me some pizza. Or what else is there? Okay? And then you get cortisol and adrenaline release. What that does, it makes you eat more of that, if that's what you put in your mouth. But it also gets you do things. She found that food is what gives her comfort. Others find other addictions. It doesn't matter. Addiction is something that is a repetitive action that you absolutely are compelled to try, and you absolutely pleasure yourself with, and you cannot stop it even if you know it's dangerous and can kill you long term. Okay? And it could be food, ultra-processed food, devices, social media, smoking, drugs, computer games, workaholic. There are people who have problems with exercise. They're addicted to it. And they will exercise themselves until they die. Okay? And then what that does goes to try to reset the amygdala. All right? The same like marijuana. But cortisol in the same time, once it activates us to eat those kind of, or do those kind of addictive habits, also suppresses the happy hormone, which is serotonin, which is our social connection hormone. Okay? And then eventually, there are some people who just find the fast track to all this. Forget about food and addiction. Just give me a little bit of marijuana. And I ask them, how do you feel when you have that? I'm happy. I feel connected. Why? It's the strongest thing you can do for that amygdala to calm down. You know why? Because we have our own receptors for it, opioid receptors that gets up. They're not only involved for the emotional release when that happens. Remember, the mom is breastfeeding, or the mom just delivered a baby? That mom is hurting. And yet, oxytocin makes us relieve endorphins, our own painkillers, our own marijuana, so actually we don't feel pain. That's just a normal way how we do. So marijuana blocks our own receptors, and helps us to reconnect, because we stop finally the pain and attach to the others by relieving stress. It's a temporary solution, okay? But in the same time, that's the next step that's involved in the addiction. Releases dopamine, which is our pleasure reward hormone, activates the reward hormone. Hey, I like that, it calms me down, do it again. Okay? And dopamine, guess what? Perpetuates the circle, blocks us again too. We become now just oriented, whatever it takes to fix that stress, give me more. Okay? And it blocks more the serotonin. So people who are under chronic stress, their circuits of pain, the circuits of dopamine or pleasure reward, and their circuits of happiness are damaged. And they serve only one purpose. I need to calm down this danger zone that I'm in. Completely different story. That's what makes you having an addictive personality trait, moves you in and out. Okay? And how can you get out of it? Doing the opposite, meaningful activities that make you happy, interact with the others, curiosity, play, helping others, all that goes away. The problem is that any addictive behavior, okay, whether it's as a child or as an adult, has negative consequence long term. Because if you're a child, you get a developmental block and delay. If you cannot do this curiosity and play and interact with the others, you're done developing. All right? Including digital media, iPhones, and everything else. Doesn't mean there is no good purpose use. I mean, there are some good, if you can play with each other using a certain digital app in an interactive way, you're physically close to each other, it's got a great use, I used to play Nintendo when, I don't know if they still have that. You play tennis, and you're next to each other, and it was unbelievable. It's different, okay? So there is some use for it, but not when it becomes isolated on your own with the little app. And basically, people who are stressed out, they have long-term stress. Their long-term stress hijacks their reward system, their pain system, and their happiness system, and the ability to live in the present. Okay? All right? And really, the rest is, we just need to sort out what kind of emotion hijacks our system. And is the blast in the past. Remember, things that we remember that are negative from the past are brought in immediately. They are stored as an automatic belief, and they come in immediately as a perception. It's fast, it's unconscious, as soon as you feel in the danger zone. And although you realize that, my pot is bad for you, as long as you're in the danger zone, no, that's good for me. Why? You feel great. Look at what's happening. The same, but if you are depressed in that last stage where you really have major depression and you are in the into an immobilization state, what works? Not marijuana, is the cocaine stimulants, because you're exhausted. So people can get addicted to slightly different chemicals depending which version of the danger they are into. Okay? All right. So no personality causes disease, but the more emotionally repressed we are, the less we can say no to the world demands, the more we take on, the more stressed also we become. It's the stress that contributes to the onset of disease in a major way, not the personality. Okay? And here's the deal. If we treat trauma as an external event, okay, then this is a piece of history that is part of us. That means, hey, I was traumatized when I was a child. I am aware of that. I identify myself with it. I am a victim. There's nothing I can do. There's no point of changing that. I'm going to suffer for the rest of my life. That's the message you do. It's called over-identification, and it's the flight version of the response. And if you see it like that, there's nothing we can do, because you can't change the fact that trauma has occurred. Or you can have the other attitude, like me. I'm the flight version. I'm going to build, you know what? I'm going to fight this. So what if I have a trauma? I'm going to show you what I can do. I'm going to be invulnerable. I don't want to ever expose myself to caring about another human or being weak again. I'm going to have this hard rock identity. I can conquer everything, you know, and it's called, for men version, denial. Usually it's with men, it doesn't have to be, it could be with a woman too, and I'll give you patience with examples. Point is, you also miss the point of opportunity of healing, because trauma, by default, you lose your mind, is a distortion of who you're born to be. And you just have the wrong perception, whether it's the flight or the fight version of it. Okay? Now, if you say trauma is what took place inside me, not the event that happened from outside. As a consequence of what happened in the sense of wounding and disconnection is the hurting that happened in me, I remember it, and is disconnecting me. Then you have the chance to change your perception about that and work with it. And healing and reconnection becomes possible. It needs to be done. However, you cannot do that if you're still in the danger zone. You have to be in the safe zone to be able to even look into it. You have to be curious about it. That's why this is done. So the only way you can reinterpret, whether you were in Windows or in the Apple software version, Macintosh, you'll have to be able to face it and talk about it. But you cannot do that unless you're honest, you're curious. You get rid of your prejudice and you talk about it, but you have to be in the safe zone. Because either denial version or over-identification with the trauma, is not going to help, but then you have a doorway to help them balance. Okay? So I'm going to stop here because I think we all need a break. Okay? For now. All right? For now, yeah. We'll take a little break, 10 minutes. Okay? All right. All right. Sometimes I think I'm going too slow, sometimes I think I'm going too fast. I don't know where I am anymore. This is so stressful for me. I'm in the danger zone. I am stressed by the fact that at any given moment I'm going to lose you. That's good. Because if I lose you, then you're going to be stressed, then you're not in the danger.
There's more trauma.
At all, any useful, this is a very research. And I had to bulk out myself for 30, 40 years of work of research in 3 months. So,
Okay.
yeah?
Yes.
Is this useful?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I've learned so.
Good, good.
We can talk in a meeting.